All right, I'll give it a minute. And in the meantime, I'd like to welcome everyone to the first session of Divrei, Responsa in Playtime by Rabbi Shlomo Zuckier. For those not familiar, Rabbi Dr. Shlomo Zuckier teaches in the Dr. Beth Samuels High School program and in the Drisha Summer Kollel, as well as at other Drisha programs. A postdoctoral fellow in Jewish studies at McGill University, he received his PhD in ancient Judaism at Yale University and was a member of YU's Kollel Elyon. Previously, he served as the director of the Orthodox Union's JLIC initiative at Yale University. Rabbi Zuckier is an alumnus of Yeshivat Har Etzion and REITs, as well as the Wexner and Tikva fellowships. He has lectured and taught widely across North America, as well as at Yale, Yeshiva University, the Tikva Fund, and Benot Sinai. A founder of the Cholera House, Rabbi Zuckier also serves on the editorial committee of tradition and has edited 2 books on contemporary Jewish thought. We encourage everyone to ask questions either by unmuting yourself or putting questions in the chat. If you're comfortable doing so, we'd love to have you turn on your camera and actively participate in the class. And now, without further ado, Rabbi Shlomo Zuckier.
Thank you, Kayla. And it's good to be here learning together with everyone. And as Kayla said, everyone's invited, if they can, to turn on their camera. And it always creates a bit more of a learning community atmosphere. And our goal is to learn through, so to speak, various responses that have been produced in the context of pandemic and in response to pandemics throughout Jewish history. So today we're going to focus on the several letters by Rabbi Akiva Eger. We'll talk more about him in a minute. Next week, and these will be mostly halachic and practical guidance. Next week we'll take a more theological angle, looking at an extended tshuva of the Rashbash, and then 2 weeks from now, the plan is to look at some contemporary responsa over the past year. Need to figure out exactly what we'll focus on, but definitely relevant things that speak to the pandemic and to our particular situation. And again, the goal here, I think, as we publicize, the goal here is to work through the tshuvos. So I'll obviously contextualize things and help go through it. But there's the handout is essentially 3 extended letters, 3 letters by Rabbi Akiva Eger, and in future weeks it'll be the same. We'll work through the texts together. These aren't the most studied tshuvos, at least they weren't until a bit over a year ago, and all of a sudden these issues become relevant again, and it's worth, people have seen it as worth exploring. People have written some short pieces on these various letters. So it's a good idea to learn them together. So I'm going to share the screen with the handout, and hopefully everyone can see that. All right, and these. Just the sefer that I got this from is called Tzidkasoim Yisrael. It's a collection of letters on these sorts of issues, and just happened to have it lined up neatly. But these letters appear in multiple places as well. Let's just talk a little bit about Rabbi Akiva Eger. Probably, I'm guessing people here have heard of Rabbi Akiva Eger, one of the great Talmudists, certainly of his generation, the late 18th and early 19th century, but really he's part of the pantheon of elite Talmudists. Period. He was the Gadol Ador. He was the great decisor of his generation, and he wrote multiple works but not only of responsa, but also commentaries on different Talmudic and halachic works. Really unquestioned in terms of his halachic authority. As we'll see today, he also had a lot to contribute on a more pragmatic level in different ways. He was the rabbi of the city of Poznan for the last 22 years of his life, which included the pandemic we're going to talk about now, the cholera epidemic of 1830, 1831, and we'll see how he led his community as well. We'll also see his writing is very often very poetic with lots of biblical allusions. We don't have enough time to fully appreciate those, but we'll note them as they come up. So that's our plan for today. And yes, I should also mention that Rabbi Akiva Eger's leadership was such that it was recognized by the king at the time, King of Prussia, and he was awarded a commendation for his activities. So this is going to give us a window into both some of the halachic issues and some of the communal governance issues that Rabbi Akiva Eger experienced and how he responded to them. So let's take a look. Here's the description of the letter. The letter he wrote at the time of the plague. Gave some guidance on what and how to pray. And also what to eat, how to function in that regard. And again, we're talking about the cholera epidemic, which in the 19th century broke out several different times. The world was much less global, and these were extended breakouts that took longer to spread and were really did kill off a lot of people. And cholera works. It dehydrates a person. It leads to vomiting and to diarrhea, and that's sort of the danger. We'll see that reflected in some of the guidance. Some of the guidance here. Okay, so he's responding sort of nice formal blessings to Yedid Nafshi, Umechamed Levavi, Harava Muflag, Charif Ubaki, Charetz Vishanun, etc. Elio, Nero Yair, Av Bezdin, Reish Mesifta, the Kal Kadisha Pleshin. So he's talking to his student, that's been identified as Rav Eliyahu Gutmacher, just as Eliyahu of Pleshin, but we know the Rav of Pleshin was Eliyahu Gutmacher, who was a student of Rav Akiva Eger, was about 35 at the time, and the date here, it's Parshas Nitzavim, Tav Kuf Tzadi Aleph, which is 1830 probably, if it's Nitzavim. Well, it might depend if Nitzavim was before or after Rosh Hashanah that year, but right at the transition between 1830 and 1831. And so he gets this letter from Rav Eliyahu Gutmacher, and here's how Rav Akiva Eger responds. It says, Michtavo Higiani B'inyan Tefila B'Beis HaKnesses. Right, I received his letter, writing the third person out of respect. I received your letter about prayer in the synagogue. L'dati ze emes she'akibutz b'makom tsar eino nachon. I think that you're correct, or I think it's true that gathering in one place is not proper. Aval efshar le'spalel kitos. Just because we can't all get together in one place doesn't mean we should cancel public prayer. We should get together in smaller groups for prayer. Each time a small group, approximately a group of 15 men to get together for minyanim. And they start at the first light, then another group. So he's responding, what do you do? This is something obviously that we saw a bit over a year ago. What do you do when there's a pandemic, when it's dangerous for large groups to gather? How do you respond to that? Obviously, every pandemic is different and the guidance is different. So the thought was having the whole community, having however many few hundred people get together every morning to daven shachris would be unnecessarily dangerous. But what's less dangerous is to have shifts, to have groups of 15 come in, do their minyan, and then they leave, and then the next group can come into the shul and have their minyan. That very much minimizes the risk because it's only a group of 15. So it's a form, it both allows for physical distancing and it limits the number of people that a person is exposed to. So he says, everyone has a set time when they come to daven, has a set, you have a sign-up list when your time is both shachris and I guess mincha mariv, or v'lomar achar tefila erev uboker tehillim ezim mizbarim sheyivchar marachas kvod taraso. So I was going to give some recommendations about what to daven. But in terms of how to daven, it's really fascinating. People pointed to this. They said the idea of limiting the size of the group, which I think in many states in the U.S. and in Israel was recommended at various stages, right, for people who, at points where it was not, not decided to be unsafe to join at all. But the idea was minimize the size of the group. So we see Rav Akiva Eger came up with this idea first, so to speak, in an earlier pandemic. Of course, the number 15 is sort of interesting. I think some states this past year had the number 10, where you can have a maximum of 10, which is a little hard to do because 10 is the exact number for a minyan. Let's say someone doesn't show up or they're davening slowly. 15, the idea is it's close enough, it's small enough that it won't be too dangerous, but also it's a few more than 10, such that there's a little bit of wiggle room. So this is the first piece of guidance by Rabbi Akiva Eger, very relevant to our experience as well. And now he's going to suggest what exactly to say and how to undergo what a tefillah to add. So he says, "V'lomar achar tefillah erev uvoker," right after shachars, after mariv, to add tehillim ezim mizmorim shegiv charat shvotzra. So decide which tehillim you want to add. V'achar hanusach kel rachum shemecha, right? The list of we say this sometimes when we in certain times of the year when we say certain tefillos, kel rachum shemecha, vanmikra shemecha, etc. A whole list of beseeching God. Anenu Hashem Anenu, Misha Anna, right? Misha Anna Lavra, Beharmori, Huya Anenu. So that prayer as well. He writes on Achar Tehillim, and then say he writes on a prayer after Tehillim. Generally, Tehillim, right? Tehillim are chapters of Tanakh, right? Chapters of and the Prakim of Tanakh. It's not obvious that you can pray, that you can daven by saying Tehillim itself. So often people suggest that after the Tehillim maybe can inspire you. You should add an actual prayer after the Tehillim, which he suggests. You should also mention the king in the prayers, right? For everyone's praying for their well-being, special prayers. We should mention the king as well. Misha Anna, sorry, I was skipping back line. Vizaro, Visarav, right? The king's descendants and officers, and all the residents of the land. Throw in a prayer for the government as well. V'lomer ba'boker u'ba'erev. Achar Parshas HaTamid B'tzibur Kol Nusach Parshas HaTores Atahu Sheiktiru V'chulei. And now this suggestion to add Parshas HaTores, right, the paragraph in the Torah that talks about the incense that was brought twice daily in the Mikdash, or brought daily in the Mikdash. Why incense? Because if you know a little bit in the Torah, there was a plague. Aaron brought the incense and it stopped the plague. So there's a precedent. There's a precedent for Torres stopping a plague, and that's what's recommended here. And of course, we can't bring the Torres ourselves for many reasons. But saying the prayers, saying the prayers about the Torres is the equivalent of bringing the Torres, just like saying prayers about sacrifice is the equivalent of bringing the sacrifice. So that's the recommendation here of saying the Parshas Torres. This recommendation was actually echoed this past year. Both, I think, Rav Chaim Kanievsky at one point suggested that people say the Parshas Torres as a special special protection. I think also Italy, which of course was the nation first, Western nation first hit very strongly by COVID. The rabbinate in Italy suggested that people say that the Parshas Torres as well. So again, this goes back to Rabbi Akiva Eger, and of course he gets it from the story with Aaron in the Torah and later discussions about how that can also lead to saving lives. Also a certain prayer, Ribon Olamim, praying to God in terms of the Ma'amados, to say that as well. So he's adding all of these additional prayers with the hope that beseeching God and this Torres equivalent would hopefully stem the plague. V'lachush, so that's the additional prayers. V'lachush shelo yitchuku anashim yoser me'asach hanal level of Beis HaKnesses. Be very careful that you don't have more than that set number, the number of 15 of people coming to shul. Right? Be very careful about this. The Evshar al Yadei Amidas Shomer mi Politzi Lashkiach Bezeh. Right? May even be worth getting a policeman to help guard the shul, to make sure that you don't break the rules, to enforce the rule, the maximum of 15 in the shul. Why? Right, to make sure that once you reach the number, the police can make sure that no one else comes in. Magistrat, you can pass on this to the magistrate, to the local government. You let them know that this is both what both what the magistrate wants, what the local government wants, and that I suggest that people follow this as well in terms of a maximum of 15 in shul. V'im yisarvu, and if they refuse, if they don't want to follow your guidance, they say no, we want to daven in groups, in larger groups. Tov leharich the Regierung, you should coordinate with the Regierung, which means again the local government, depot, and bring them in. You'll certainly be successful. Im tazkiru shmi she'ezharti eschem shelo lios kibbutz gadol v'beis hakneses malkom tsar. It certainly won't hurt if you mention me. You mentioned that Rabbi Akiva Eger suggested this. That you shouldn't join a large group in a small place. That I suggested this, and this whole all these tefillos and that I suggested to say these extra tehillims and to pray for the king. The one thing that's very interesting here, well, there's a few things that are interesting. The bringing in of the police to guard the shul is an interesting idea, and even to coordinate with the government. People have, some people have this past year have said, well, number one, not taking the medical recommendation seriously, which Rabbi Akiva Eger certainly seems to be doing here. But then they would say things like, well, if you tell the government about our illegal minyan, that's Masira. You're a Moser. You're turning in other Jews. That's a terrible thing. The Gemara has very negative things to say about Mosers. So there was a very strong negative, some very strong negative things said about people who turn in others. And yet, this is precisely what Rabbi Akiva Eger is suggesting that people do at the time. And also, the way that he sees his rabbinic leadership, it's not just about which tehillim to say and which tefillos to say, but to make sure that people, right, in the shul especially, it's the rabbi's job to make sure that people are doing things that are safe. But we'll see in a bit, he'll emphasize this even further. And just a word about the king. He keeps talking about the king. So the Melech Yarum Hodo, may his glory be great. So this is Friedrich William III of Prussia, who became king in 1797, ruled until 1840, and we're now in 1830, 1831. And he was the one who gave Rabbi Akiva Eger a commendation. But of course, back in Europe, it's not like in America today where you say the tefillah, you don't say the tefillah. That's sort of a personal choice. In Europe, if you weren't praying for the king, that was a very dangerous thing. So that's why it really gets emphasized here and in the other letters. Certainly, not that he had anything against it per se, but any public letter, you want to make sure that you emphasize the prayer for the king. You wouldn't want them to get the wrong idea. All right, so let's keep going in with further advice from Rabbi Akiva Eger. He says, "Yakubat l'maris kol toraso be'ad kol nefesh v'nefesh l'mikaton v'agadol be'af ba'ad ubar b'mai imo." So everyone you should gather. You, right, your great Torah honor, meaning you, the other rabbi, should gather for every single soul, small to old, every person, including fetuses, including the babies of pregnant mothers. Shisha Gedolim Polanish. So I think Polanish is the Polish currency. Get 6 large Polish coins. Umea Mekubats Yaser Raso Pidyon Nefesh. And do a Pidyon Nefesh, a redemption of life. And the Pidyon Nefesh, this is very close to what we do when we call kaparos. If you do kaparos with money, that's essentially the same thing. A Pidyon Nefesh, where you say, this person is in danger or might be in danger, and here is money. The money redeems this person's soul, and the person should therefore be freed from danger because their soul has been redeemed. And what do you do with the money? We'll continue. If you need, if you don't know what to do with the money, we could use the money here for tzedakah. Of course, the money goes to the poor. We'll see in the next letter, Rabbi Akiva Eger talks about the great financial burdens within his community for a variety of reasons at this time. But the idea of Pidyon Nefesh, it's a combination of 2 themes. Number one, this idea of redemption, right? Literally, Pidyon Nefesh, redemption of the soul or of the life. With this idea, we have this idea in Tanakh, the idea of kofer, of redemption money, which doesn't always work, but at least in these contexts it can work. But also the other side of the coin is the money that's being used for tzedakah. That shows the value. That shows the value there as well. So it's not just an empty ritual. It's an act of chesed that functions in this way. So that's a third thing really. So we have the distancing or people in shul. We have additional prayers in shul, and now this idea of pidyon nefesh or tzedakah. That's the third strong suggestion from Rabbi Akiva Eger. And now we're going to get some medical recommendations as well. And I'll just note ahead of time. I think in the 1830s they knew a lot less about cholera than we know today. So I wouldn't take this as a practical medical advice, but Rabbi Akiva Eger was working with the best medical knowledge of the time. So he says, "Lishamar ma'od milis kaira." A person should get very, very careful not to get cold, right? The idea that being cold, you're more likely to be sick. That's why it's called getting a cold. Tov lislabesh kol echad b'mapa flannel, right? Everyone should wear a flannel shirt or covering. A chagur ala betin, that's belted around your chest. Apparently, the armies at the time wore flannel as well for the same reason. So this was the state of the art, as it were, at the time for how to stay safe from cholera. To wear flannel, keep warm. Gurkin, not to eat bad foods, especially gurkin, which is cucumber or pickles. Person shouldn't eat fruit or fish or drink a beer. I think part of this may be some of these foods may be more likely to allow for diarrhea, which is again one of the challenges of cholera is it leads to diarrhea, dehydration. So maybe some of these foods are more likely to allow for that. A person shouldn't eat when they're already full of a tov yoser lecho pamim harbe v'chol pam shelo b'meruba. Better to eat lots of small meals than one large meal. Again, maybe that's a similar consideration. Alios naki shelo lehashos tina v'lichluch babayis. This actually we know does prevent spread of cholera. To be clean, not to allow disgusting things in the house, right? Water contaminated by cholera is the way it spreads. So avoiding that would be a good thing. Change your clothes at least once a week, which again, back then probably wasn't taken for granted. And then he throws this in, which I think is also very relevant today, not to worry, presumably not to worry too much, and to avoid any sort of sadness. And recognizing that the mental health is also an important consideration, which I think is something that we saw the past year, although maybe it took people a little longer to recognize it, that it was sort of a global problem than maybe it should have. But keeping in mind that when there are pandemics and people are staying away from each other and not getting together, there also is a danger of on the mental health plane. I don't know if that's exactly what he meant. It could be that he thought that being sad somehow made one susceptible for cholera, but at the very least, it's certainly a relevant consideration. And now the way they thought cholera was conveyed was through bad air. So I mean that's literally what the word malaria means. Cholera is slightly different, but bad air is how it spread. Therefore, he points out the following suggestion: don't walk around in the city at night. That's bad air. But during the day when the sun's out, then it's good to walk in the field, get some good air. Open the windows in the morning to get that air. Don't go outside on an empty heart or empty stomach. I guess that the thought was that's bad for you. But you should eat mustard seeds on an empty stomach. And in the last letter that we'll hopefully get to, he mentions that he saw this in earlier medical Jewish books as a way of helping. The likach rinda min eichenholz, the rind or the bark of an oak tree, you should take that, and that's good for you as well. So there were some apparently medical cures, or what were seen as medical cures at the time, that were recommended. Lishov b'mayim ilirchotz b'zeh shachris panav biyadav. You should wash your hands and face every morning. Again, this probably actually does help, assuming it's clean water. L'zalif hachadarim ezapamim b'chometz chazak v'tov me'urav b'mei vradim. Okay, and sort of wash off the rooms with vinegar mixed with a flower water. So again, the water may have helped there as well. So again, to just take a big picture, what are the recommendations? Social distancing, additional tefillos, additional prayers, staka in the form of pidyon nefesh, redeeming people, and medical advice. Again, based on the medical advice they had at the time, we may not exactly agree, but that's the guidance that Rabbi Akiva Eger offers, and really it's fairly wide ranging. Right, he didn't say I'll stay in my lane and just tell you what to daven or just give you halachic answers. He really goes into detail about how best to help people, really seeing part of his role as being able to help on the public health plane. So that's the first of the 3 letters here. We'll pause for a minute if anyone has questions or ideas or thoughts, the things they were wondering about. We can also talk about a couple of things that we're not going to read inside if we have a chance, but we'll open the floor for a minute or two.
Hi, Shlomo. I have a quick question. It wasn't in the tshuva, but I'm curious if there's any knowledge, if there was any just to kind of trying to think about it through today's lens, was there any backlash against some of the things that he said, any pushback from the community, or do you have no knowledge of anything of that sort?
So I mean, I do think I don't know of external sources that would corroborate that, but I think in what we read, we saw that Rabbi Eger is worried that the communities he's sending these letters to, he says, well, if you get pushback, here's what you do. You bring in the police and you can say that I said to do this, right? He knew his word was very strong. He was the Gadol Hador, and police obviously have a monopoly on power, can make things happen. So I think there was a concern that there would be pushback, right? It seems like Rabbi Eger certainly expected that was a reasonable possibility. And again, that's also in some ways parallel to our experience or some parts of the Jewish community over the past year, right? It's hard to get people out of their rhythm, especially for religious things. And even if the religion dictates it, even if the Gadol Hador says, well, we need to change our usual, it's not normal, that doesn't always work. Inertia is a very powerful thing. Other thoughts or suggestions, or we can move into the second letter, which is a little bit of a different nature. Okay, so let's jump into that. And this letter we're going to see is Michtav Sheshalach Be'erev Yom Kippurim Tafkuf Tzadi Beis. So this is right at the beginning of Tafkuf Tzadi Beis. That's like September, October of 1831. A letter he sent L'Kehilos, Hamburg, London, Amsterdam. Right, the 3 communities of Hamburg, London, and Amsterdam. Rabbi Eger sent a letter. Uviksham Lavo le'ezos kilaso b'tmicha kalkalis. So he asked them to support his community with financial support. At the time that the cholera began to appear. Just a word about the word cholera. Anyone recognize that word? So on the one hand, it's sort of a transliteration of cholera, but it's not exactly. If you really wanted to spell cholera in Hebrew or Yiddish, you wouldn't spell it cholera. But cholera comes up in the in Tanakh. It's in Koheles, right? It's a choli rahu. So because the word cholera sounds like cholera, and cholera is talking about a bad disease, so there's like a convergent etymology, right? The word, the classic Hebrew word and the new word that sounded similar sort of converged. And now the word in modern Hebrew, I believe, for cholera is cholera, which came from the Yiddish, which of course comes from both Tanakh and the non-Hebrew word cholera. There were some people who thought that the word cholera actually comes from cholera, but that seems to be inaccurate. In any event, so this letter is going to be a little different than the other one. The other letter was guidance to a shul as to how to, or community as to how to proceed. This is going to be more a plea for resources, and it's much more poetic, I guess. You hope if you write a poetic enough, a flowery enough letter, you're more likely to get donations. So, quote Hashem yichofef aleichem, right? God's honor should go flow above you. Rashechem shivtechem v'ziknechem, your heads, your tribes, your elders. Tiru simchos v'gil, so you should see happiness and rejoicing, b'mchugas mishpachosechem, the circle of your families, birchos shamayim me'al yariku, kol tuv b'monosechem, the blessings of heaven above should shower all good in your places of dwelling. Haktsinim hanagizim hamifoarim l'shem utehila minale adas yeshurin. All the leaders of Adas Yeshurun, of the community of Yeshurun, the Jewish people, Uvrosham Adonim Harav, and especially the rabbi. And he sent this same letter. He filled in a different Rav to these different communities. So here's his plea. So he says, Me'es Magide Chadashos, or Zeitungen, right? You heard on the news, Shamatem Ki Cholera, Bavonasenu Arabim, Muaf Biaf Elenu, the Konen Po Irenu. You heard that cholera is overtaking us, and it's destroying our city. Helsa be Isha v'tzachanasa b'kiryasenu. Right, it's gone up in prayers in our kirya, in our city. Hine ki harga harugim uvragza rachim baltiskara. It's killing many, and in its anger it won't remember. As opposed to God, Barogas Rachim Tizkor, we ask that God remember in His mercy. Right, so you see the footnote here. They mention it's a reference to Habakkuk. Right, God in God's anger has mercy. Cholera does not have any mercy. Kosabiada chavar malei mesech v'tagar mizeh. It pours out a cup full of destruction. Archa shulchana tavcha tivcha. It set its table. It's slaughtered. These are references to different psukim, but in poetic form, describing the destruction. The hikdish kruim adei ha'avim malusach ra'al, and the clouds have been set aside and filled with poison. They come down to earth. They don't go back until they finish. Maybe it's not lechol, maybe it's la'akel. They come down and they destroy. They don't finish eating or digesting these clouds full of poison. Just destroy across the world. Maybe this is the thought of the air being bad air. Wherever this death and destruction turns, it spews forth its anger. Hakol tikach gam sav gam yeled. It takes everyone, both old and young. Lo matzu manoch. They didn't find any rest. Shod tanchumea achzarihi. Even its breast of consolation is evil. I mean, there's no consolation. There's no way of avoiding this plague. This cholera rejoices at destruction and hunger. It goes into the stomach. Again, pointing here to the indigestion that it causes. Imhu rak the ein bo hamachla azos lo amrahon. Ki im ach nefesh achas haisala l'shalal lo tishkov lo tenuach ade gam megaras beis hames haisala lemana torfa v'romsa ve'in matzil. It's not satisfied with taking one soul. It then will spread out among the whole household, and will take apart and destroy, and no one is saved. Ein machseh mi tar alasa. There's no being saved from its poison. So he's pointing here to the idea that it's the contagious aspect of cholera. That doesn't just take one person; it takes their whole family. Ein magen lifnei klei mashchisa uklei mafatza lo yadu sava. There's no protection against its destructive weapons. No one knows how to satisfy it. Akuva midam halichoseha. Its steps are tracked with blood. Yagon v'tuga be'archoseha. Suffering and pain are in its way. Tarheva b'na'ar b'zakein. V'gamal olalim v'yonkei shadayim tilahet lehava. Grief and pain are in its way. And also both young and old, and even babies, it sends forth its fire. Lo chascha mimaves mimos nafsham v'chayasam lidvar haskira. So it doesn't hold back from death, or v'chayasam lidever hiskira. It handed over its life forms, all the people, to pestilence. So as you can tell, I don't know if we're going to. I think the poetry recedes a bit, but a very strong, powerful poetic description invoking multiple biblical proof texts, and just showing the relentless and the relentless pain that cholera is inflicting in his community. Of course, God didn't forget to have mercy, and God's mercy didn't go up in his anger, didn't disappear. Even if God is pushing us away with his left hand, he's trying to bring us back with the right. God is saving us. Shut machala lo tavor banu chas v'shalom pamea chesed v'rachim v'ezras Hashem yisparach ba'avasu v'chemlaso tirpana kochosa v'gishta lanu. Hopefully, Hashem will help keep this disease at bay. Aval agam ki lo kalu rachmei Hashem asher gmalanu gam yikiri k'tzine adasi sibivu be'ezer Hashem ki amachla zos bal tifros g'daria be'anyi adasi po. Also, we've taken some efforts also to try to help prevent this disease from reaching us. And in the day of need, or the day of calling, they didn't stand apart not to help. We know that this is part of the covenant of cholera. This is how cholera works. If you don't eat, that's bad for you. Presumably, cholera, it kills through dehydration. If you don't eat, you're not getting hydrated. So it's necessary for people to have food, right? Something we didn't experience in Western countries during this pandemic, which is, sometimes diseases are exacerbated by people being unable to eat, just they can't afford food. And this was apparently a challenge in Posen at the time. If food is cut off, there's no way of defending against cholera. Our community girded their loins and sent everyone what they needed. Right, God should remember for good that they helped all of our poor be fed. We had some healing for the pain of our nation. I'm delighted at the wonders that were done among individuals in the community to support the poor. This September, whatever it is, right from September. He had a letter written back in September that he mentions haluta po, that he's enclosed here. So he sends asher nishlachena me'es balkenu yaram hodo, where he encloses with his letter requesting help from these communities a copy of the thank you letter sent to him from the king, from King Friedrich William. He had received a thank you from Friedrich William for the work he was doing in his community, and now he uses this for the goal of trying to raise further funds to support the community. Asher chaim bertzono hatov v'agidu l'teva v'gidei chadasho simchas libo al kol asher nasapo. Right, he's the king who has control over all life, and he's so happy with what's done here. Ba'adasenu imanim ha'amlalim lahachios b'rav nafsham, right, to feed the poor lahasech ba'adam mibli nasun lavo hamashlis b'makom shivtan, to help prevent the disease from affecting them. So we're doing important work here, he says. But the days are long and the people are weakening. People don't have the power to help. This weight is fully on their shoulder. They're the ones who have to provide for everyone. And the truth is, those who are more wealthy within the community were hurt even before the plague. Back 9 months ago, because the Polish army, the Polish weapon bearers, turned their thoughts to this fight. And we know they call it the November Uprising, or the Polish-Russian War of 1830-1831. And months before the pandemic, or this epidemic, the Russia and Poland were fighting, and as he's going to say, that caused a cutting off of international travel, and many Jews made their living doing trade. and that very much hurt them. And then you had an epidemic, and people were starving and needed food. So it's sort of a double whammy. Also, sort of as a footnote, it could very well be. I think historians believe that part of what brought the epidemic, the cholera epidemic, to Poland in the first place was the war. The engagement between Polish and Russian soldiers actually brought cholera from Russia to Poland as well. So it's maybe a triple whammy. I don't know. So again, Zed Tisha Chadash Masher Anshe Poland Noshke Romi Keshes Havchu B'Yom Kravish Tenoseim Haya HaMischor Rachok Bezikim. Mischor, business, right? Trade was distance in chains. I think it's a bit of a mixed metaphor, but it wasn't happening at all. Banu Uveneha, both internally and internationally. Countries were cut off from coming in and out. The staff of bread, or the regular allotment of bread, was broken. Right? It's our bread and butter. Jews trade. That's the main profession. Our city is sort of sitting desolate and doesn't have food. And we hear people crying out, everyone's weak, and the sword of the plague is going back and forth. Paraphrasing Pasuk. Therefore I said, I'll go to the great ones. I think here he means great financially, maybe. Those who fear God, who consider his name, to speak to their hearts and to tell them all this, of course, in a plea for funding from these communities. And here he jumps into this is the pitch, or this is the ask. Adas Yeshurun, right? Community of Jeshurun, Yeshurun, me'az hatavas hitavtem, im kol ish yashar, holei chastechem, v'amitchem, ketovas levavchem, lachem nitn l'morasha. From the time you helped each person with chesed and truth, according to the goodness of your hearts, this is given to you as an inheritance. This is what Jews do. Jews help and do chesed. Mata chesed ve'emes natu alai tilmei levavchem v'tzimchechem bruchim hayu. Right, this chesed and emes, this loving kindness and truth, are planted in the furrows of your hearts, and its plants are a blessing. Shu'u name azasher bara shemes adam. Right, turn now from the fact, or focus on the fact God created man. Amar vehi ava ve'achva yisachdu osam yan liyan lo yinaked. This will lead to a brotherhood and love, and will unify you hand in hand and won't be undone. Im ish re'ehu lazor yikra gam im harchik me adam ha'ir yishma bikaro elav. Even if we're far apart from one another, he's sending us to cities far away, we still can help each other. Ata baha es mafitz Allah ha'ira natsur mitzura hakol atzur va'azav anachnu lo noshanu. This is the time we're totally abandoned and deserted, and we're not saved. We need your help. Na achai, please, brothers, tenofef laniye reinu birchas yedechem avilem pri tumas levavchem. Right, give forth, spread out to the poor of our city, the blessing of your hands. Give them the fruit of the goodness of your heart. Mimerchat taviu lechem tnufa. Right, again, playing on the pasuk, mimoshvosechem taviu lechem tnufa. Mimerchat, from a distance, bring the bread of tenufa, of waving, right? He says tenofe, wave forth, send forth the bread. Ilam machseu magen, pirsu kanfei chasdechem alai hadalim, me'ein od lahem makom pnos yaminu small. Send forth your wings and the wings of your mercy on those who are poor and have nowhere else to turn, right or left. Nidvas tovas levavchem yale leratzon kisapuach batzei ayar sharon ba'arava. The gift of the good of your hearts should go forth liratzon, in goodwill. Right, karbanos are supposed to be liratzon, right? So it's like a karban. Your nidava, your free will offering of tzedakah, should be like a nidava, a sacrificial free will offering. It should be yalo liratzon. It should go up before God in goodwill. Kisapuach batzei ayar, like a fruit tree in the trees of the forest, uksharon ba'arava, like a rose in the desert. Odos mincha. and it shouldn't be insignificant that not for some time have I spoken to you about making a gift. Meaning I don't do this every day, but we really need it now. Please offer a gift. Ho'ilu pnuas nechem l'shavasi v'ayoshev b'mroim yishmas shavasechem. Turn your ears to my salvation, or to my community's salvation, and the one who dwells in heaven will hear your cries. Yazhir hatzlachosechem, will ensure your own success. You should live pleasant lives in the circle, the bosom of your families. All good should not be prevented from you. To be morning and not night should be the days of your life. At your will and the will of your friend. And right, he signs it, Akiva Gans, Rabbi Akiva Eger. And this letter really a plea, both outlining the great crisis in the community, the combination of the cholera plague, and really the fact that there's not enough food for people to eat, and how people who are malnourished are at greater risk, and reaching out to the heartstrings of these Jews in communities across the world, or across Europe at least, asking them for support here. So that's the second letter, and again, really poetic. Every many biblical and Talmudic references, some more explicit than others, in making these pleas. We'll just pause for a minute. Any thoughts or reflections on this? This is somewhat less halachic or guidance, but it shows part of what rabbinic leadership is, or at least certainly a large part of it, which is making sure that people who have needs, especially financial needs, are taken care of. I think also in the past year we saw, I think some shuls, but I think also we have communal organizations in addition to the shul, many of whom undertook these projects, and food kitchens saw food pantries and the like saw their numbers go way up, and different groups allocated food and other resources. Again, I don't think people were starving and in the way that they were in Europe, but definitely food insecurity still remains an issue in our world, and there's some parallels there. Any thoughts? All right, so we'll jump into the third letter. This one is a bit closer to the first one. It's communal guidance, and maybe we'll move a bit more quickly for reasons of time and whatnot. A letter that Rabbi Eger sent to many who asked him, and this is a mass letter sent to many people. With guidance in terms of prayer, Ezra Shiyazru Ishlariyo, and the help people should do for one another. And this is Mar Cheshvan Tuf Tzadi Beis, maybe a month and a half later in late 1831. And he writes the letter to Moshe Katz, the Av Bezdin of Ansbach. So he says, Bali Pale al Shlilas Michtav Chuvasi Adko. It's no wonder I haven't written this letter to you, I haven't responded to you. It took a while. You asked me how to prevent this disease, cholera, right? Notice he doesn't spell it cholera, he just says cholera. This is how you spell cholera in Yiddish, right? It's phonetic, right? The aleph is a, the ayin is a, cholera. Shenis pashet, bavonosenu harabim, kimat b'chol medina v'ir v'ir, right? All over, at least all over in the area of Europe that we're talking about. Hashem yirachem behera, God should mercy quickly. Teilu kila godal chalishas kochi, bavonosei harabim, v'rov tirdos hatzumos asher alai, because of my weakness and my many responsibilities. No AC naso, I was too weak. Mehanimna lahashiv kol shualai be'inyan halazeh. It was difficult to respond to everyone who asked close and far. Once I had a bit of rest, I said, let's do this. Give a short version of my answer in general. Steindruck, I don't know exactly what form of printing that is, but I'll print a little pamphlet. Right? Print a letter with guidance to send to everyone, and here's the letter. And right, again, this was sent to multiple people with his guidance. Adasi alek doshim the Hashem aleim yirachim. Asu kasher he'arti lachem he'arti osam v'yachil levavim Hashem Anasher lo yavo yemei hara umora mipnei pachad Hashem b'hadar ga'onu lefashmish v'masim v'takein ha'uvas lidfok al pischei Hashem b'tfilos v'sachanunim. And he calls out to the people. God should have mercy on them. He says we should call out to God and fix the wrongs and introspect and do tshuva and pray to God. Add various chapters of Tehillim. The main thing is not quantity but quality of prayer. Right? Read it 8 times. Maybe it's talking about finishing all of Tehillim 8 times as a community, possibly. And then the prayer after Tehillim. Again, recommending not just Tehillim as a prayer, but the prayer after. Find slightly different texts if you don't finish the whole book of Tehillim. So also pray for the king. As mentioned before, Pitum HaTorah as well. Right, so the recommendations here so far are tshuva, right, repentance, tefillah, prayers, including some additional prayers, including Pitum HaTorah and tzedakah, which, right, tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah, that's sort of a classic. You want to be mavir esroa hagzera, right? So that's where that's where this paragraph is coming from. Then he adds other things. When it comes gamkein minidve leiv sach chashuv, right? We collect from those who are generous a significant amount of funds. Let's get a group of honorable, good people with good character traits. Commission, right? Set up a commission of good-hearted people. We'll deal with the following issue. To give enough funds every week for the poor to be able to eat. Especially people who previously were able to support themselves. Now they're the newly poor. They may not be willing or able to get the help they need. This commission is supposed to investigate, figure out who needs the funding, and ensure that it gets to them. And he says, this is literally the saving of lives. They're so they're under such financial pressure, they have to eat gross foods or unhealthy foods. This leads to them getting, and here he does say cholera, not cholera, but cholera, right? So switching back and forth between descriptions. But the doctors say that eating these foods makes you more susceptible to cholera, and they're going to eat this out of financial necessity. This won't only affect them, this will affect others too. Right? It's contagious. So the fact that these people get sick will affect others as well. So it's essential that we make sure that no one gets sick and that everyone have the funding to eat healthy foods. Sometimes right, there are people who it's a little too difficult to spend money. They can't help in that way. But he says that they should instead help as like volunteer nurses. Sometimes people get sick and they won't call a doctor right away. They'll wait a couple of days until it gets worse. Then it's untreatable. Then it won't help. It'll be too late. I guess the people already are dehydrated beyond repair. Make sure to go to the doctor right away. So this is medical advice, right? To not wait, but to make sure you go to the doctor right away. The money we collect is not just for food for people who need it, but also for medical supplies. The relevant drugs, and to pay the doctors, for all relevant factors. And that's why he says if you feel not well, you should immediately go to the doctor. If you feel not well, and vomiting or diarrhea, you shouldn't wait 1 second. tell the doctor immediately, commission, make sure you get a doctor immediately. Until they get fully better. And then he says, commission, spiritus. Right? Make sure that everyone will use the funding also. Make sure that everyone gets tea, coffee, and spirits. Alcohol. As they wish, as they desire, to clear their stomachs, or to rub their stomachs, so to speak. But again, if the issue is dehydration, certainly the tea and coffee should help with that. He hired doctors for the to be on standby at the local hospital, where the people don't have a place to go, and now there'll be doctors in this place where people can go. And he says, I warned multiple times. Right? Very important that people eat and drink and act as the doctor suggested, right? Follow the science. Whatever the doctors say not to eat, stay as far away, stay an arrow's throw away, very far away, as if this is an important line, right? Treat it as if it's not kosher. Don't violate what the doctors say, even one tiny bit. Don't go for a walk in the morning on an empty stomach, which the doctors say not to do. You need to drink warm water first. If you violate the doctor's orders, you sin greatly against God. According to the Gemara, says danger is more severe than prohibition. You have to be more careful for medical issues than you have to do for halachic issues. The doctor says that eating this or doing this is dangerous. It's as if it's eating not kosher, and maybe even worse. Especially in our case, it's not only danger for you. You're not just taking on a risk for yourself, you're endangering others. You cause the disease to spread in the city, your sin is too great to bear. Last year, Rav Asher Weiss wrote a tshuva. What happens if someone realizes that they spread COVID to someone else and cause them to die? And how do you do tshuva for that? What is the tshuva? And it's not a simple thing, right? Because you can causally trace your actions to a person's death. Obviously not intentional, but it's a really horrible thing. As Rabbi Akiva Eger says, Gadol avono minaso, your sin is too great to bear. This is what stood for us, our prayers, our tzedakah, that God's kindness has overwhelmed us. This disease hasn't overcome us too much in our city. We'll keep this going, and we won't see the full weight of these dangers. Then he says, right? We saw this in the earlier piece. The mustard seeds. I found in an old book. The footnote thinks it's Amtachas Binyamin, which is Rav Itzik Hirsch Kotetsky, a medical book, a Jewish medical book. Doesn't say how many. Right, swallow some mustard seeds on an empty stomach. Who it also talks about bread, slices of bread. Not to wet it with anything. Eat it dry. Toast, right? Eat toast, which is good for people with an upset stomach. The least of a kiso test yam keep in your pocket for 9 days so it dries out. Make sure you don't lose it. But the point is, more medical advice here, right? Toast is good. Apparently, mustard seeds are good. But we see in this piece, it talks about the advice of the various medical advice, but really emphasizes listening to the doctors and tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah. Quickly just mention in passing some other rulings of Rabbi Akiva Eger, not in these tshuvos, but on Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, there was an issue of how to fit people in the shul. This was for his own community. And he said we should, because we should distance, it should be the shul should be only half full on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And it wasn't then like now, like there's more seats than people often, right? That when you say the shul should be half full, it means that half the people go to shul on Rosh Hashanah, 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. The other half of the people go to shul on Yom Kippur, and everyone else stays home, right? There were no other locations. It's not like you rent out the local school or something. There were no options. This was what there was, and that's what they did. In terms of fasting on Yom Kippur, Rabbi Akiva Eger said that people should fast, although he had doctors on standby, whereas some others, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter famously suggested that people not fast. There's many more discussions to be held. Also, Rabbi Akiva Eger has a tshuva about saying Kaddish. The nature of saying Kaddish shifted. It used to be only one person would say Kaddish at any time. That this is still the minhag in some communities. But around this time, Rabbi Akiva Eger said so many people have to say Kaddish for their relatives who died in the cholera epidemic that you can have multiple people saying Kaddish simultaneously, which is the mainstream minhag nowadays. In any event, I think we had a chance to look through, to read through and get a sense of how Rabbi Akiva Eger responded, a combination of some halachic considerations, some aspects of how to daven, some aspects of how to conduct themselves medically and the great importance of doing so. The Stucca organization or the commission to make sure that people were supported. Rabbi Akiva Eger himself reaching out to others, to other communities, trying to ensure that. So we really get a window into what it means to be a Rav and a Gadol Ador in the time of a pandemic. And as I mentioned throughout, many of the things that Rabbi Akiva Eger emphasized are really echoed today in one form or another. So I'm happy to entertain questions or thoughts or suggestions now. Thank you for being together. This is a wonderful opportunity to learn through the tshuva. Yeah, any questions or thoughts?
Okay, I'm unmuted. I posted this in the chat as well. It's interesting to me, having now had several classes from different perspectives relating to plague, etc., that he in no way seems to imply that this cholera makkah is because we've done something wrong, that there is sinfulness, that this is God's punishment of us. I don't see any of that kind of tone.
Yeah, but that's a fair point. In these letters, at least I haven't read everything Rabbi Akiva Eger wrote on this, or maybe there are things out there. But yeah, definitely what we see here, he doesn't mention that. He does say to do tshuva, of course, but I think as many have pointed out, just because tshuva is a proper response to crisis doesn't mean that you're attributing the cause of the crisis to people's sins. Sometimes a little hard for people to grasp that, but it's an important distinction that, as Judith, as I think you're pointing to. That's an important point. I would say, I don't know if we're going to talk about this in 2 weeks, but I'd say in the past year, I gave a class on this for Drisha a year ago. Many people pointed to various averos, a wide range. Really, everyone had their own, whatever someone's favorite avera was, they blamed that on the pandemic. But yeah, you don't see that here. And it's sometimes I think when I gave that shir a year ago, I quoted by my Rebbe Rav Lichtenstein that there's something of hubris in saying, I know what the cause is and I can fix it, and I'll tell you. And usually it's not introspection. It's usually you people who do that did something wrong. Yeah, 100%. An important point here as well that Rabbi Akiva Eger doesn't go in the direction of. I see there was a request. Someone, Emily said, wanted to know if we could send the tshuva about Yom Kippur and Kaddish. Okay, I'll try to round up other relevant things and we can send them to the people who signed up for this class. So thank you for asking that. Any other questions, comments, suggestions, ideas? If not, Kayla, why don't you tell us about coming attractions?
All right, thank you, Rabbi Zuckier, for a great class, and thank you to everyone who joined us today live on Zoom, on Drisha Live, or on Facebook. We're going to continue our Sephira plague-related programming tomorrow night at 8 p.m. with a class from Rabbinit Sarah Leah Sarna called Quandaries of Quarantine in Biblical, Talmudic, and Hasidic Literature. In addition, our summer kollel will be starting up soon at the end of May. And if you are interested, please check our website to consider applying. You can find out more information on this class as well as all of our upcoming Sphere programming on our website at www.dresha.org/classes. Thank you again, Rabbi Zuckier, for this opportunity to learn with you, and for everyone who attended. We hope to see you again soon.